Having said these things, Jesus went forth with his disciples across the Kedron, which flows in the winter to where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who was handing him over, also knew the place because Jesus often met with his disciples there. So Judas, taking a detachment of soldiers and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, comes there with torches and lamps and weapons. Jesus, therefore, knowing about all the things descending upon him, went forth and says to them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered him, "Jesus, the Nazarene." He says to them, "I am." Thus, when he said, "I am" to them, they stepped backward and fell to the ground. So again he inquired of them, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus, the Nazarene." Jesus replied, "I have told you that I am. So if you are seeking me, allow these to go," so that the word he had spoken might be fulfilled. "Those whom you have given me, I lost none of them." Simon Peter, therefore, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave and hacked off his right ear. And the slave's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put the sword in its sheath. The cup the Father has given me, shall I not most surely drink it?" So the detachment of soldiers and the chiliarch, along with the officers of the Judeans, seized Jesus and bound him, and led him first to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was that year's chief priest. Now it was Caiaphas who had advised the Judeans, "It is expedient that one man die on behalf of the people." And Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. And that disciple was known to the chief priest and entered along with Jesus into the chief priest's courtyard. But Peter stood outside at the gate. Soon the disciple who was known to the chief priest went out and spoke to the girl keeping the gate and conducted Peter in. So the maidservant keeping the gate says to Peter, "Are you not also one of this man's disciples?" He says, "I am not." And the slaves and the officers were standing there, having made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were warming themselves. And Peter was also with them, standing there and warming himself. So the chief priest interrogated Jesus concerning his disciples and concerning his teaching. Jesus answered him, "I have spoken openly to the cosmos. I always taught in the synagogue and in the temple, where all the Judeans congregate. I spoke nothing in secret. Why do you question me? Question those who have listened to what I told them. Look, they know the things I have said." And as he said these things, one of the officers standing nearby struck Jesus a blow to the face, saying, "This is how you answer the chief priest?" Jesus answered him, "If I spoke amiss, bear witness to the wrong. But if well, why do you beat me?" So Annas sent him bound to the chief priest, Caiaphas. Now Simon Peter was standing there warming himself. So they said to him, "Are you not also one of his disciples?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the chief priest's slaves, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, says, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" So again Peter denied it, and immediately a cock crowed. So they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the praetorium. And it was just before dawn. And they did not enter the praetorium so that they should not be defiled, but might instead eat the Passover. So Pilate went outside to them and says, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered and said to him, "If this man were not doing evil, we would not have handed him over to you." So Pilate said to them, "You take him and judge him according to your law." The Judeans said to him, "It is not legal for us to kill anyone." So that the word spoken by Jesus, indicating by what death he was about to die, might be fulfilled. So Pilate went back into the praetorium and summoned Jesus and said to him, "You are the king of the Judeans?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this on your own, or did others speak to you about me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Judean? Your nation and your chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this cosmos. If my kingdom were of this cosmos, my subjects would have struggled so that I should not be handed over to the Judeans. But for now, my kingdom is not from here." So Pilate said to him, "Are you then a king?" Jesus answered, "You say I am a king. I was born for this, and for this I have come into the cosmos, that I might testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth hearkens to my voice." Pilate says to him, "What is truth?" And having said this, he went outside again to the Judeans and tells them, "I find absolutely no case against him. But it is a custom among you that I should release one of you at Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Judeans, therefore?" So again they cried out, saying, "No, not this man, but Barabbas." And Barabbas was a bandit. So Pilate then took Jesus and flogged him. And the soldiers, having plaited a crown from thorns, placed it on his head, and threw a purple cloak around him, and went up to him and said, "Hail, King of the Judeans!" And they gave him blows to the face. Pilate went outside again and says to them, "Look, I'm bringing him out to you so that you might know that I find no case against him." So Jesus came outside, wearing the thorn crown and the purple cloak. And he says to them, "Look at the man." When therefore the chief priests and officers saw him, they cried out, saying, "Crucify! Crucify!" Pilate says to them, "You take him and crucify him, for I find no case against him." The Judeans answered him, "We have a law, and according to the law he ought to die because he has made himself out to be God's son." When therefore Pilate heard this statement, he was more afraid, and again went into the praetorium and says to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus did not give him an answer. So Pilate says to him, "Do you not know that I have the power to release you and the power to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You had no power over me whatsoever were it not given you from above. For this reason, he who handed me over to you bears the greater sin." Thereafter Pilate sought to release him, but the Judeans cried out, "If you release this man, you are not a friend of Caesar." So Pilate, hearing these words, brought Jesus outside and sat upon a tribune seat at a place called Stone Pavement, or rather Gabbatha in Hebrew. Now it was the preparation day of the Passover, and it was around the 6th hour. And he says to the Judeans, "Look at your king." So they cried out, take him, crucify him." Pilate says to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king other than Caesar." So then he handed him over to them so that he might be crucified. So they took Jesus, and bearing the cross for himself, he went out to what is called Skull's Place, which in Hebrew is called Golgotha. And with him 2 others, one on this side, one on that, and Jesus in between. And Pilate also inscribed a titular notice and affixed it to the cross. And what was written was, "Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Judeans." Many of the Judeans therefore read this title because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. So the chief priests of the Judeans said to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Judeans, but rather that this man said, 'I am the King of the Judeans.'" Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." So the soldiers, when they were crucifying Jesus, took his garments and made 4 shares, 1 share for each soldier, and with the tunic left over. For the tunic was seamless, woven as a whole from the top down. So they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but rather cast lots over who shall have it." This is that the scripture might be fulfilled. They divided my garments among themselves, and over my raiment they cast a lot. Now, beside the cross, there stood his mother, and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary, the Magdalene. Therefore Jesus, seeing his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing by, says to his mother, "Madam, look at your son." Then to the disciple he says, "Look at your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her for his own. After this, Jesus, knowing that everything had now been completed in order that the scripture might be fulfilled, says, "I am thirsty." A vessel full of diluted wine was placed there. So putting a sponge soaked in wine around a hyssop, they brought it up to his mouth. When, therefore, Jesus had taken the wine, he said, "It has been completed." And lowering his head, he delivered up his spirit.
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, it causes me to tremble.